scenes, peel back the blunder. Judgment day, jostling on the stage, breaking it down, the law in the head. Truth I'm better, no room to sway. All right, now it's judgment day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of You Be the Judge. I'm your host, Lady J, and today we're going to be talking about a controversial case. It's controversial because it's considered high profile due to it being a rapper, but also because they have been in jail so long and there has not been a conviction. So today, we're talking about YNW Melly and his co-defendant, YNW Borland. So let's get into it. So with YNW Melly, he is being accused of murdering his two childhood friends, which would be YNW Sack Chaser and YNW Juvie. So a little bit of what went on in this case. So everybody mentioned YNW Melly, Borland, Sack Chaser, Juvie. They were all at a studio in Fort Lauderdale or outside of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. So this is another Florida case. And if you learned anything from the last case that we went over, Florida and their laws, it gets a little crazy there and they don't play that. So anyways, they're at the studio, studio sessions, you guys leave out of there late. So it's about 2:15-ish, 17-ish in the morning. And so, the whole crew, they coming out the studio. There's two cars, a Jeep Compass, which is a gray color, and a red Mitsubishi SUV type vehicle. I'm not sure exactly what the vehicle is, but it's a Mitsubishi SUV and it's red. So at this point, they're coming out, everybody's getting into their appropriate cars. And in one car would be YNW Borland as the driver, Melly sitting behind him, and the other two on the other side of the vehicle. So they're leaving the studio. The other vehicle, they make it to their destination, and YNW's vehicle, they don't necessarily make it there. So I'm just gonna, read from the court document so that you guys understand exactly what went on, of what they are being accused of, the probable cause of what all went down. On October 26, 2018, so you guys know how long this has been going on. 2018 is a long time. It's now 2026. At 4:35 a.m., Cortland Henry, which is YNW Borland, entered the emergency room at Memorial Miramar, requesting assistance for two passengers in his vehicle, as they were shot multiple times. So what the story is, they were shot in a drive-by. It was told that Melly wasn't in the vehicle when this occurred, which is, another piece of it that is a little bit controversial, which you'll see later on down the line. But at this time, like I said, they all left the studio. The YNW vehicle, they're driving to their destination. And what they said is they were getting off the exit. They went down this road that they weren't really familiar with, and their vehicle was shot up in a drive-by, pretty much at a light. So from there, that raises flags for them, because they see this video of all of them getting into the vehicle. But when Cortland or YNW Borland arrives at the hospital, Melly is not in the vehicle. So they're kind of like, where was he at in all of this? At this point, Borland, he's at the hospital. He goes in there, lets them know, hey, my friends, they've been shot. We were shot in a drive-by. We don't really know what vehicle did it. We're just bracing ourselves. He's explaining the whole story. The two there pronounced deceased on the scene, so it's very unfortunate at that point. Let's see here if we can go back to the document. So Officer Amengor, who was working the security detail, exited the hospital and made contact with the vehicle that was stopped in the loading zone. They requested medical staff for removing the two passengers. Both passengers were unresponsive and exhibited multiple gunshot wounds. The vehicle transporting both vehicles also sustained a minimum of 8 projectile entry points on the right side exterior and 1 visible projectile entry point in the rear liftgate. So a shot up on the right side and from the rear. The front passenger, Anthony Williams, sustained gunshot wounds to his torso and head, while the right rear passenger, Christopher Thomas Jr., sustained several gunshots to his back and head. Both passengers on the right side of the vehicle were pronounced dead by medical staff. Henry was questioned, and according to him, he departed a recording studio in Fort Lauderdale with 2 victims in his vehicle. Henry stated he drove on I-595 to I-75 and exited heading west. And then just as he passed Southwest 160th Avenue, a vehicle pulled up next to him and started shooting. Which, at that point, they are asking a lot of questions. Why would somebody be targeting you? What would be the reason that somebody would just be following you to shoot up your vehicle? Why didn't they do this at any other point aside from when you got off on this exit and stopped? And why are you uninjured, but these other 2 people are injured, obviously? So at this point, he's stating that, I was uninjured because I was hiding the floorboards of the vehicle. I ducked down, XYZ. At this point, also, while they're questioning him, while he's at the hospital, they're checking him out, making sure that he's medically okay. He's there for a couple hours. They did as well swab his hands, I believe, at that point. And later was determined that he had gunshot residue on his hands. So that's one key thing here. So later on, he's telling the story of how this happened, but a couple things here. When he's telling this story, 1, it's a drive-by. 2, he tells them the location that it happened. And 3, he told who was in the vehicle, which he stated was him and the 2 that are deceased. Later on down the line, when they get to, questioning things, the police get to investigating, obviously. They go to the crime scene. There's no glass on the ground there. There's no bullet holes. So at that point, they're like, there's nothing here where you told us that this originally happened at. So, they're just kind of like, did a drive-by really happen? Additionally, of course, the police, they seize the vehicle so that they can get any evidence out of there. They can start investigating the vehicle as well. They did go ahead and find some bullets inside the vehicle. Of course, there's glass, blood, all of the things, right? Because obviously 2 people were murdered. So, they're just pretty much wondering, why would there be bullets in the vehicle, or casings rather, if the shooting occurred outside the vehicle. So another thing that the police do, they want to make sure that you were in that area. So they went ahead and checked with the residents. They said they didn't hear any gunshots around the area. And they went ahead and pinged cell phone towers to see who was in that area at the time, because obviously everybody has a cell phone. And it did come up that Melly was actually there in the vehicle as well. Like his phone tracked the entire time that they were in this vehicle, up until a little bit before Bortland arrived at the hospital. So that's another thing that's controversial in this case, that Melly stated, well, it was told that Melly wasn't in the car prior, because they did question the other set of people that had left, and they did confirm that they pulled up to their location. They pulled up to the house that they were staying in, and they have a gated entry, so they had to check in with like security and stuff. They did confirm that they actually made it there. So, doesn't show that they were a part of this. But, if all these things were going on, why did you guys lie about where this happened? What happened? Melly wasn't in the car. If you didn't do these things, why are you lying? So at this point, let's see. So once they get, who was really in the vehicle, they get to, trying to question Melly. He's given his answers and his runaround, and he was a part of a drive-by. They're pulling phone records, all the things, because of course they have to investigate it. So Melly at some point left the vehicle before going to the hospital. Also, when Bortland pulled up to this hospital, he changed his clothes. He has a hoodie on. He doesn't have any blood on him. Like, they're just kind of like, why do you not have any blood on you if there's two people that just died, got shot? There's blood all over the car, but there's nothing on you, even splatter. Nothing. So just a lot of different things that, we're told. And then when the story starts coming out, it starts unfolding a little bit more. So let's see. So now that we know a little bit of what happened and a little bit of the lies, like stated, the prosecutors are alleging that shots were fired from inside of the vehicle. They are saying that the bullets came from the left rear position where Melly was sitting. So they're alleging that the entry points were coming from left to right in the back of the head for both of the parties who are now deceased. They are stating that it was staged afterwards. So after the shooting occurred on the inside of the vehicle, that Melly and Bortland got out of the vehicle, shot up the car to make it appear as if it were a drive-by. Because when they did go to the actual crime scene, after they pulled the cell phone records and the tower pings, that's where the glass was. That's where the bullet casings were. And they were trying to reconstruct the scene and what may have happened. They had to reconstruct, how the bullets were in the vehicle, obviously, to see what way they may have been going. And it's really showing that they came from inside the vehicle and not from the outside. But also when they're doing these cell phone tower pings, they can see not just those phones that were in the vehicle, but if there were anybody else in that area at the time, if they happened to ping. But nobody was in that area at the time, just literally those 4 people. And they describe the actual crime scene as being like desolate. Nobody was really there. It's kind of like swamp area, like nobody goes there. So that's really the background on what the prosecutors are alleging. Let's see. Now, what's making it controversial as far as how long this trial has been going on, right? So they have been in prison, or jail rather, since 2019 when they were actually arrested. So this is a capital murder case, double homicide at that. In Florida, they need 2 aggravators to make it a death penalty case. So that is pretty much what is taking so long, because they're needing, well, capital cases, they move slower because the legal standards are higher. Jury selection is longer. Evidence is scrutinized more heavily, and appeals are expected just back and forth from each side. Obviously, they're needing to make sure the correct evidence is placed in, the evidence can be used. And I want to make it clear that in this case, no lyrics are being used, because they do recognize that is creative expression. I know when I was watching the videos, the prosecutor for the state, they did state they will not be using any of the lyrics, because he does have a controversial song called Murder on My Mind, which, you know, that kind of brought up red flags for them. But this song was recorded years before this even happened, and produced and put out months before this event had even happened. So even if they wanted to use lyrics, that song would not apply in this case, because it happened far beyond when this unfortunate incident happened. Another reason why this case has gone on for so long is because of the complex forensics. Like I mentioned, the bullet trajectory analysis, where they're having to go into the vehicle and see which ways the bullets were coming from. You know, bullets have entry points, exit points. So it's kind of the same thing when they're looking at it in the vehicle. So just like when they do the autopsy, they see where was the entry point, where's the exit point. They're doing that same thing in the vehicle to make sure they're getting, you know, their analysis is correct. They're having to reconstruct the crime scene. And like I said, had to get that cell phone data. So they had to get proper warrants and things for that. And like I mentioned, certain evidence, is it admissible? That's a lot of the reason why it's taken so long, because the prosecution team, they have to prove, you know, without a doubt that Melly did this. So when they're presenting their evidences, it has to be on the facts. They can't do it off of emotions. They can't do it off of hearsay. They literally have to prove this man did it. So, you know, his first trial ended up in a mistrial due to a hung jury, which a hung jury is, they could not unanimously decide that this man was guilty of this. I believe there was one juror that did not want to convict him, in which when he was stating his case, two other jurors happened to agree with that juror, and they did not convict. And at the time, Florida's law was you had to unanimously agree to convict him, in which that resulted in a mistrial. So when a mistrial happens, the state can either, you know, pick it back up, keep trying to build their case to win. So that's pretty much what we're in right now. He's trying to, well, they are trying to build their case against Melly and present some different evidences, some better evidences that really stick it to him at this point. Personally, just watching everything that I have on this case, the trial in itself, Bortland's trial, the prosecution has not done a great job at proving that they are guilty. There's a lot of things that they did not get up front, a lot of different warrants. They don't have a motive. They don't have a weapon, which you don't necessarily need a weapon to prove somebody guilty. But, you know, they at least need a motive. And they don't have that. Because at this point, people are asking, why would Melly, who also happens to have these people's names tattooed on him, he has one of the mother's names tattooed on his neck. So if you see him in court, most times he's wearing a turtleneck, which was advised for him to do, so it's not really brought to the light, questioned, so that he can cover up the mother's name and one of the guys' names on the other side. And like I said, they're childhood friends. So what would be the motive to kill your childhood friends? It's just crazy because you grew up with these people. Like, this is your family at this point. You're in a collective group together. So it's not really adding up for a motive, and they don't have one. They didn't find one when they went through his phone, they went through his social media. Um, but they do have an interview from Juvi's dad in which he thinks they may have a motive. Um, if you check out this TikTok clip that I found.
From the very beginning that Melly was responsible for your son's death and the death of Anthony?
From the day one, I believe that Melly was responsible for my son's death on October 26th when I first heard the story, because his explanation when I finally talked to him in Cortland on a FaceTime, their response and how they was reacting, they showed no remorse. They didn't act like they was grieving, like they lost a best friend or nothing. They was, in my opinion, they was in the best spirits. They never came to town, never came to my son's funeral, never came to Sack's funeral. And these are best friends. He passed straight through the county of Indian River, went to Brevard and did a music video, but he couldn't even stop and pay his condolences to his best friend's mom. He even got Jana tatted on his neck. That's why his defense attorney got him wearing turtlenecks and shirts to hide his neck, because he got the Jana tatted on his neck. That's Sack mom's name. And he got Chris' name and Sack name. And this guy, that guy is just, I have no words for that guy.
What was it in particular that was said on that FaceTime that made you think that Melly was responsible?
Nothing was said. Actually, it was like the demeanor. It was like the body language, really. Like, I was just reading them, and as I'm telling them and asking them questions, I got so emotional, I started crying. They wasn't reacting to, they act like they didn't have take a loss at all. That's how I took it. And then when I was talking to them, I still had in the back of my mind that something's not right. Something's not right.
Did they tell you anything about what they claimed happened with the drive-by they claim happened?
No, they had absolutely no explanation. Like, we have to figure it out just like the police.
Chris, why do you think that this happened? Why do you think, Melly did this? Because, Melly is on trial. The state has to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt that he committed these crimes. But why do you think this happened?
I think the story about the 200,000 with Anthony was a true story because it's not reported, but Chris told me the same story, and also it was a $500,000 play, and Melly was going to get 200,000, Sack was going to get 200,000, Chris was going to get 100,000, and as I'm hearing it from Chris, they was going to sell the YNW brand, not a record deal or nothing like that. It was like for the brand itself, and by them being founding members, they was going to get a piece of the pie. So I don't think Melly did it on his own. I think that manager guy got in his ear and did a little divide and conquer. Because if it was up to Sack, it would never be 100K management.
They were going to sell the YNW name for licensing or to sell products. What do you mean they were going to sell the name?
For marketing, licensing, stuff like that. I think they want to go up on the big umbrella just to push them, I think. Push the brand more global. That's what I'm thinking.
And so you think that Melly wanted a bigger cut of that then?
I think Melly didn't want to give them guys nothing. He wanted to be the only one to shine. And then they came to town next day and gave the mothers 15,000, the other mother 10,000. So I thought to myself, if Sack was going to get 200,000, Chris was getting 100,000. If we could pay these people 25,000, keep 275,000, that's how I saw it. It just nothing added up. Melly still to this day for me to hear him call them boys his best friend is an insult. That is an insult.
Was there any sign of bad blood before your son's life was taken and before Anthony was killed? Or was there any tension there that you knew of?
Not with Juvie, not with Chris, but you heard things about him and Anthony getting into like altercations about uh, disputes about money over certain situations, and they got in a fight prior to that, and they said like the story that they say Sack beat him up and knocked his goals out in front of his girlfriend, and like 2 days later, I think that's when the incident happened.
Melly is saying that he is innocent. His defense attorneys are saying the state can't prove its case. But it's my understanding you believed from the very beginning that Melly was responsible for your son's death and the death of Anthony.
From the day one, I believe that Melly was responsible for my son's death on October 26th when I first heard the story, because his explanation, when I finally talked to him in Cortland on a FaceTime, their response and how they was reacting, they showed no remorse. They didn't act like they was grieving, like they lost a best friend or nothing. They was, in my opinion, they was in the best spirits. They never came to town, never came to my son's funeral, never came to Sack's funeral. And these are your best friends. He passed straight through the county of Indian River, went to Brevard and did a music video, but he couldn't even stop and pay his
I think it's repeating.
best friend's mom.
So yeah, like I said, the father, when he talked to Sack and when he talked to Juvie, that's where he is getting his motive from, although that's not brought to the light of the court. Nothing that they found in messages or anything like that. I do want to address a comment from Vince Harris. His phone can be in the car without him being there. Not saying that's not true. But as we can see on camera when he was leaving the studio, he was in that vehicle. He was even walking out of the studio on his phone. So we can obviously see that he's active on his phone. Not to mention, they did pull up that he had been on like Snapchat at the time. They did pull records from Snapchat, so they did get a warrant from Snapchat for Snapchat. Let me tell you, all snaps, they do not ultimately get deleted. So they were able to get records from Snap. He was snapping his girlfriend, snapping some other people after the fact of what happened. Because one of the things that came up in court was somebody asked him, was he okay? And he said, I did that, which is very vague. You can't really put those words to something because you did what? You didn't outright say, I murdered somebody. So that's something else that the prosecution is trying to use against Melly. But like I said, Melly was in the vehicle, as we see on video, while they were driving from the studio and around the area of where they did this drive-by. And then they even drove around for, I believe, like 15 to 20 more minutes after that, before heading in the direction of the hospital. And minutes before Bortland showed up at the hospital, the phone went wherever Melly had went. So the phone was no longer with the vehicle. The phone never popped up at the hospital. So if the phone was just in the vehicle and Melly wasn't there, why did it not go to the hospital too? Another thing that was brought up by the that was brought up as well, is that this was like a community type phone, in which a win on the prosecution side was when they went through this phone, there were numerous pictures of Melly, videos, etc., that would kind of show ownership of this being that person's phone. So that was refuted in court as well. Like I said, prosecution does not have many things in this case. So they really need to get their stuff together. This next trial, which is in January 2027, in order for them to actually get what they're looking for, because in my opinion, it's not really looking too hot for the prosecution as far as convicting him. What's the word, Neves? Like, subscribe, comment. Thank you for your support. I appreciate it. And again, shout out to Steph, since he's the one that had me look up this case. I've heard about YNW Melly, but I don't listen to him personally. I don't listen to none of them. So I really have no bias, because I know there's a lot of people saying free Melly and stuff like that, but I have no bias. I don't listen to his music at all. Now, on the defense side, their argument pretty much rests at there's no physical evidence to prove that Melly pulled the trigger. They did find Melly's DNA in the vehicle on the door handle, because like I said, he was in the vehicle. We seen he got in the vehicle, so he's placed in there. But they still have no proof that he shot them, him or Bortland at this point, although Bortland had gunshot residue on his hand. There's still no proof that those two actually shot them, because another thing that came up, although Bortland had gunshot residue on his hand, if this was a drive-by situation, he could have been shooting back at them, which is believable, because if you had a gun, why wouldn't you shoot back, right? If they're shooting at you. They stated that ballistics do not conclusively prove an inside shooting. Now, the person that did the ballistics and the reconstruction inside the vehicle, they are very confident in them and their findings, obviously. I would say personally, in my opinion, it is a win for the prosecution side as far as the reconstruction inside the vehicle, as well as what the autopsies show. Shows that the entry is coming from the left side, the left rear, because both victims, like I said, were shot in the head. And the way the officer at the hospital, when Bortland was being questioned, when they asked, you know, are you injured? She's like, you know, it's very surprising with the amount of bullet holes that were in this vehicle that you're unharmed at all. Like, not even a graze, like not anything is wrong with you. And obviously, to bring up, Melly was not injured at all either. Government shutdown possible again in a few weeks. No federal investigation during shutdown. I have not really got into the government shutdown, so I don't really have an opinion on that right now, but I can definitely look into it. I can make some shorts or something on it, you know, just to kind of update y'all. So make sure you like and subscribe, turn on the notifications, so that when we get to talking about the government shutdown, you're aware and you hear what we got to say about it. But also some of my podcast mates, like before you go to sleep, they might talk about something like that. They like to talk about politics and all of the type of craziness that's going on right now. So subscribe for them too, because they come on Wednesday nights and they got some good topics, some good things to say. I'm being watched. We're all being watched. I mean, as long as you're not doing nothing wrong, you're not out here breaking the law, what can you do? We're all being watched. I'm not really worried about it. But as long as you're watching this podcast, now I'm worried about that. So like and subscribe. So back to the defense. Like I said, they're trying to really push on this drive-by explanation. The defense, when I watched the videos over the trial, they have really won a lot of the motions to suppress evidence, because one, prosecution did not go about it the correct way. Prosecution, they did not really get as many warrants as they probably should have to get information that they needed, like the weapon. They didn't go searching the house that the other vehicle was in to see if anything was there. They didn't, go search where Melly lived, anything like that. So a lot of the key things, they just kind of fumbled, which is really hurting them at this point. The prosecution's witnesses are unreliable or inconsistent. They do not have many witnesses, if any at all. They have had like the parents of the decedents come up to talk about their children, the relationship that they had with Melly and things like that, in which that draws kind of an emotional response on the jury. So the prosecution is kind of relying on that as well. But again, they don't have a motive. They don't know why this would have happened, XYZ. But the other witnesses, like they tried to get Melly's ex-girlfriend to come up there. They couldn't get her. She's accusing them of intimidating her mother. So witness-wise, it's not looking good for them. And then they cannot use any rap lyrics, which they're aware of because it's artistic expression and it does not constitute a confession. There are no confessions. There are no witnesses to say that they did this. Although they wanted the ex-girlfriend to come up there because there was a FaceTime call after this incident happened where allegedly they are saying that Melly told them, hey, we're in a drive-by shooting, XYZ. And, they're asking him to say, okay, it was a very short call, which obviously they pulled with the cell phone records, but they can't get them up on the stand. And like I said, they don't have any witnesses. Sideline Stories, what's up? Like and subscribe for them as well because they definitely give you the parlays. They'll let you know about all the sports. Rams Crash House, Commander's Table. Those are my people too. So subscribe to Black Office because we all the hot stuff going on. But yeah, I can agree they don't have enough on him. And I can agree that's why they're still holding them, because prosecution is trying to find anything to sway the jury. And in my opinion, Melly did it. In my opinion. Will they convict him is another thing. I don't think so, because like I said, prosecution is very weak. They don't really got much. And they're going to have to take the L at the end of the day. When you don't do your job to the fullest extent, you got to take your L. You can't keep holding somebody because by the Constitution, you have a right to a speedy trial. And although capital murder cases and death penalty cases can take a longer time due to all the appeals and things like we discussed in the beginning of the story, you still cannot keep holding somebody. You've already had one mistrial. But now at this point with this second trial, because DeSantis has changed the law from unanimous to 8 of 12 jurors have to convict for you to be placed guilty. That's one thing that is going to be a little bit different in this case when they get to going the second time around. But we won't know until January 2027. And the reason why it's pushed out that far right now is because the current judge actually sided with the defense over some evidence being suppressed. Obviously, the state appealed it and it has to go to a higher court. So it's going to the Court of Appeals. They have not reviewed it right now. So they're really waiting on that to come back from the Court of Appeals to see if they can use whatever this evidence was. But at this point, they can't use it, waiting for it to come back, delaying the trial. And it's a mess because it's going to be about like 7-8 years that he's been in here at this point. I don't know if he did it or not. I just know they've been holding him too long and keep pushing shit out too far. Now, I'm not saying that I know he did it. But in my opinion, from the court cases, the evidences, the analyses that I've seen on this case, because I've been researching this for about 3 weeks now, literally been watching videos like literally half the day on this sometimes. And in my opinion, I think he did that. But he just might happen to get away with it because they don't have evidence. They didn't do their job. They did not do their job. But he has been in there a long time. And for them to have a mistrial, if they go to court again and the juries cannot decide again and it ends up in a mistrial again, at that point, it will be up to the judge to let Melly out, because you cannot keep this person in jail because this is violating their constitutional right to a speedy trial. So they would then have to, you obviously can't convict him. We've had 2 mistrials at this point. You don't have the evidence. You've had more than enough time to get y'all shit together and find some stuff and make sure the evidence is proper. They've even had one state prosecutor actually dismissed from the trial just because of them trying to hold this up and them not putting in the proper evidence and not informing the other side of the evidence they're trying to bring to light, because they do have to discuss the evidences being brought in. But sideline stories, I'm not going to say he should have been out, because when I've looked up the law over this, and I know I've said this before, like, dang, he was in there for a long time. But this was a capital offense and also facing the death penalty because of the aggravators. He allegedly killed multiple people in a cruel and premeditated manner. Those are the 2 aggravators they needed to make it the death penalty. But with capital cases, you more than likely are not getting bond, and you as well are going to be in there a minute because of all the evidences that they have to do. Especially in this case, they had to reconstruct the crime scene. They had to reconstruct the bullet holes, their entry points, and things like that. So yes, capital cases, they can take 3 years on the low end, but as long as 7 years. So it's kind of within that range. But like I said, the prosecution, they really are messing up. They don't have much to hold on to for a conviction because they can't prove that he pulled the trigger. And plus it's in Florida. Whole nother headache. Another Florida case. So hopefully this time around, we'll have a better answer, because he's been in there for a long time. And that brings me over to Bortland, because he actually took a plea deal on the case because he was facing the 2 counts of the capital murder with a firearm, 2 cases of accessory after the fact, and then also some witness tampering charges that he had as well. So he actually got a plea deal. Melly has not gotten a plea deal. And with Bortland's plea deal, he actually just took it not too long ago, but they gave him 10 years. They dropped the murder charges, and they're giving him credit for time served. So he should be able to get out within the next 1 to 2 years and do 6 years of probation and restitution.
Angle in this seat. You have the projectile coming in, exiting through the top of the skull, and then continuing through the windshield.
You said windshield.
Or I'm sorry, the window.
Can you say that it was at the top of the window, or the bottom of the window, the middle of the window?
I cannot.
So based on that projectile and the blowback, you can make what opinions?
So based on the angle of this this projectile, the blowback is indicative of a firearm being in close vicinity of the head. The head is something that bleeds profusely when it's pierced. If you've ever fallen on stairs or hit your head, it bleeds like no tomorrow. And because the projectile entered in right below the skull, the blowback ended up coming in the direction of, as I was speaking earlier about the hose, in the direction that it came from. And you will get that with a very close shot. That blowback then proceeded after the shot. It went up, it hit this headliner and continued and falling into the back seat.
And so I want to go to some of the other photos. There's a yellow jacket that's on the very back of the vehicle. Is it important to know whose DNA and blood was found on that?
What yellow jacket?
Let me come back to that, the other photos, so we'll come back to that in a moment. Okay, so in terms of the location of the firearm that fired the shot, and we were just talking about in CSW 6745, does this attempt to accurately recreate the potential location of that firearm?
So the purpose of this photograph is strictly demonstrative to show where once the projectile enters into the head, you're going to have the blowback, which again will come up, strike the headliner, and then continue. It's actually continuing this way and landing back here behind the driver in this area of the vehicle.
In terms of the driver and the t-shirt that he was wearing, do you take into account the location of the victim's DNA on his shirt?
Well, based upon the blowback pattern up here, I would expect to find some blowback here if on a driver, if a driver was there.
Okay, Sergeant, you can answer that question.
Why don't you restate your question? Yes.
So you were discussing that how you would find and determine angle.
And yes, Rams crash out. They did get caught hiding evidence from the defense. So that's why the defense, they won on that part of having a motion to suppress that evidence. So the prosecution can no longer use that. And that's why I said the trial has been pushed out until January of 2027, because the state, they did put an appeal to a higher court, and they're waiting for them to still decide if they are able to use it or not. But they have done that multiple times, which is why one of their prosecutors was dismissed from the case. And another prosecutor was brought in, one that actually convicted the 3 people who killed Extastion, if that's how you say it, which she is now the prosecutor for this case. So we'll see how it goes on that part, because like I said, they really don't have much. I feel like he might even get off, but in my personal opinion, I feel like he did that, because it's like, why would you lie about all the things? Like, if this was a drive-by shooting, why would you not say where it happened? It was really a drive-by, so why would you even have to lie about some of the things that you did in this case, you know, that you weren't in the car? Why would you get out of the car when the car is being brought to the hospital to drop off, you know, the 2 people that obviously have passed away? So that's not really sin right with me. as far as, you know, this wasn't a drive-by, in my opinion. Oh, wow. People on social media have been saying he did it because they was graping him. Now, that's a new theory for me because I did not see any of that when I was going through videos on like TikTok and stuff. But what the dad was saying was this was pretty much over Melly wanting most of the fame, the money, and all that, and that Bortland, he was, you know, willing to really kiss Melly's ass in that point and like just be like his top dog type thing. They also have said that since they were in a gang, that this was like an initiation type thing, because apparently they recovered like a gang Bible through his email. They recovered other things that showed that he had joined a gang, but they actually can't use that in court as an aggravating factor because that was something else they did not run by the defense. So, like I said, prosecution, they really dropping all their little balls. But also with Bortland, like I was saying, he took a plea deal where they're giving him credit for time served. They gave him 10 years, which he'll be out within the next about 1.5 to 2 years, I believe they said would be the soonest. 6 years probation, and that he has to do a proffer. If y'all don't know what a proffer is, that means he can be questioned by the prosecution to basically give information on what happened. So he pleaded no contest. He did not admit any truth to what they are saying that they did. Although he would be convicted as guilty by the judge, he did not admit anything that happened. He just took this plea deal. And in another portion of his plea deal with him doing this proffer, they are expecting him to obviously cooperate and give information, but he does not necessarily have to. So he doesn't gain anything from cooperating, and he does not get punished for anything for not cooperating. So really, he can just pay them dust. He already took his plea. The judge made it clear during his plea that, you know, what he does in his proffer with the prosecution is on him, which I don't think he's necessarily going to say what happened because obviously Melly's still in court. You know, they would be using that to convict him. And I feel like he probably, you know, that's his brother at this point. Like, he's not going to tell on him. So I feel like he really is just going to give them the information they already got, and they can just keep it moving from there. But he's expected to do that. They have a deposition set up for him. He's gonna go up there and act like Lil Woody on the stand. He might. He could just be there like, I lied about everything. I'm just here so I don't get fined. I'm just doing my time. I'm just here because you asked me to. Like, he literally don't have to tell them folks nothing. He can't use the Fifth Amendment, but he literally don't have to cooperate because he already took his plea. He already about to be out. So another thing they were saying was, you know, he probably spoke to Melly before even taking this plea because he took this plea deal the day before trial was going to start for him, which he would have been facing like 3 life counts, a 75-year count. It was crazy when the judge was telling him all the stuff that he was facing. Like, literally, he wouldn't have got out if they were to convict him. But I still don't feel like they would have been able to convict him if they're using the same evidences in Melly's case, in Bortland's case, because they don't hardly have anything. Obviously, we know he's the driver, but you can't say that he was the shooter. He tried to render aid because he brought them to the hospital. You know what? What more can you do from there? But Yeah, it's crazy, but I'm predicting that it will either be a mistrial or they can't convict him because they just don't really have anything strong. Like everything is really circumstantial. They don't have anything concrete, and they can't use the DNA from the door to say that Melly shot them because they have no gun. They don't have none of that. So it was definitely interesting to go through this case and see all the ways that, you know, prosecution can really F up their case, because you need to do your job right the first time and throughout, because if you're trying to win something, why are you not doing it the proper protocols? Because not all judges are going to side with you just because you're with the state. So I feel like the families on this, they're really going to be upset at the end of it, because I feel like Melly going to be getting out. Or are they going to try to pin something on him because they're already trying to say that he was witness tampering as well. They're trying to say that he was passing kites through. Apparently they have these kites of his. Apparently they have jail calls, video visit calls, but none of that was really brought to light as of yet. This was something that was brought up at the hearing to see if he can get bond, because his attorney is pushing for bond, in which, you know, she's trying to make sure that he has an ankle monitor on, that he has security at his house to make sure that he is there, not doing nothing, not leaving. He can't have no guns, which on that part, I don't know how you gonna make sure he ain't got no gun, because anybody can have a gun in the house that he's staying in, but that's neither here nor there for me. You look a kite like Benjamin Franklin. So a kite, if you ain't never been to jail, I never been to jail, but you know, I heard about it. A kite is when you sending messages from one inmate to the next. So he was sending messages, whether that be on paper or however they do it. I don't know how they do it. I know they be passing it through vents and other people and shit like that, but they call it a kite. And they send it through for communication so they can conspire and give information. Can he sue for monetary compensation if it's another mistrial for wasting his time? I don't necessarily think that he can sue for them wasting his time, because, again, this is a capital case and it can take this long. So I don't think it's something that he can sue for. Now, it's not like a wrongful conviction where later he was found to be not guilty. Like, you know, people go to jail for something they are accused of and they didn't actually do. Those people can sue. But I don't think that he can necessarily sue for being in there, because, you know, first time mistrial. Now they're hoping it goes in their way because the state of Florida changed their law. So they're hoping that these jurors will be on their side with the evidences that they're going to be bringing up. But it is a waste of time. It's unfortunate. It's annoying, I'm sure, for him. And they're really trying to scrutinize him in any sort of way. Like, they're literally watching his movements in the court. Because if you were to watch the court show, or, you know, the trial itself, he's in there. You can see him praying. You can see him. He's like going like that. And apparently it said that he's kissing his angels. They're getting mad because he in there laughing at stuff like with his attorney. But people don't understand that even though this is a trial and yeah, everybody's looking at you, even the jury trying to see how you react, like, this is still a human at the end of the day. He has been in there so long, you know, he probably is like numb to this whole situation in a way. So I feel like that part is kind of lame, because it's like, is he not supposed to laugh? Is he not supposed to have human emotions? Some days he might be in there pissed off. Some days he might be real cool with his lawyer. Like, you know, I guess he needs some joy too at the end of the day. but people are really trying to scrutinize him in any sort of way. Although I think he did it, but if he get off, then it's the F up on the prosecutor's part, and kudos to his lawyer, because his lawyer, he had a black man, I can't remember his name, but apparently he was Boosie's lawyer when Boosie was on death row, my bad. So that lawyer, he was actually a good lawyer. You know, he was checking them up front, like, no, we're not doing that. And then he has a woman lawyer now, so she really getting on to them too, and she really advocating for him to be out at least on bond until he can go back. You know, she said that he's not a flight risk because he doesn't have a passport. He doesn't even have a driver's license. So she's like, he's not a flight risk. I have all this extra security in place. She's like, you know, he's obviously been to court every single day. He turned himself in. If he was a risk, why did he turn himself in? He could have ran, but didn't, you know? So, right, he better get Brian Steele, because he definitely be killing them cases. He be getting them done. There's definitely some real hard attorneys out there, and they will advocate to the end, because if you can prove your case, that's what it is at the end of the day. Like, that's all court is. Y'all got y'all side, and y'all got to prove I'm guilty. I don't have to prove I'm innocent. You have to prove that I'm guilty. But my lawyers are supposed to rebuttal based on what you bringing up. So, yeah, I feel like Brian Steele would be a good one to be on his side as well.
I'm publishing now, Pembroke West entrance. And officer, so we don't have to go through the entire video. Did you recognize the vehicle that just entered the hospital?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that the vehicle that you observed, that you testified to earlier?
Yes, ma'am.
Going to publish the outside ER entrance. What are we seeing on the screen right now?
So this is the sidewalk portion I was telling you about. Immediately on the bottom left corner of the screen, which is those white dashes, that's where the cars drive through. Those dashes are for them to see pedestrians walking across into the ER. Then there's a sidewalk portion, and these are the two doors of the ER. The left door on the left side of the video is the ER adult entrance, and the right is the pediatric entrance, but it's one big area. And then in the middle is the park bench. Right behind that glass is a security desk. I'm sitting in the middle of both of those doors.
And that subject that we see in the video,
That's the gentleman that the person made.
continuing to publish. I'm going to pause the video at 4:36 and 11 seconds. We see a second individual in the video frame. Can you recognize that person?
Yeah, that's me.
Publishing, continue. I'm gonna pause the video at 4:36:51. Is this the where you indicated to us earlier that you had him sit down, Cortland Henry?
Okay.
Now, you can't see the Jeep in the video frame, is that correct?
Yes,
The Jeep would be located at the bottom left, my left of the
Yes.
screen?
yes.
Okay. And I noticed that you approached and you were talking into something. What was that?
That's my authority.
Okay, was that your, how you were able to request assistance?
Yes, ma'am.
Continuing to publish.
That's me telling security guard I need medical staff. I'm putting on gloves to check purples.
I like making my podcast. I don't like.
So yeah, that was the scene of Borland going into the hospital when he first dropped them off. So do y'all think, just in y'all opinion, based on everything that was brought up, that Melly did it? Because I mean, like I said, if you didn't do it, why did you lie about where the crime scene was, about being in the vehicle? You know, those are two things really where I'm like, if you did not do it, you had no reason to lie. And Bortland, you had no reason to go change your clothes, because what's the reason? What's the reason for all that? But I mean, I guess the positive on Melly's side is he turned himself in, and the prosecution, they don't really got much on him. So he may just make it out. And it's unfortunate that 4 families is losing out at this point. 2 are gone, 2 in the system, which we don't know the reason why this happened. We don't know if it's a drive-by, which again, I don't think it was, but he was in shock and his bro didn't want to be dirty. Free Melly. He was in shock. You was in shock and you didn't want to be dirty. Like at that point, the whole vehicle is dirty. Like the whole vehicle is covered in blood. So it would have made literally no difference for you to be clean or dirty going up in there. If you were in shock, you're going straight to the hospital. You're not going in circles, as it shows, like from when they pulled all the cell phones and the towers that they were pinging to. It showed that they literally were driving around and then decided to go to the hospital. So cell phone records is something crazy, because they will ping to them towers and they can show you where your vehicle was or where you were heading. Because like I said before, it showed the other vehicle going in that same direction. At first, they all were going in the same direction. And then the YNW car, they went a whole different way. And then all of a sudden, before getting to the hospital, Melly exited the vehicle. Where he went, I don't know. They say that he went with Frito Bang, I want to say. I've seen the moon cover the sun, so I don't know if it was a drive-by or not, for real, for real. Like I said, we don't have concrete evidence on which one was the shooter. But as far as like, I haven't really heard of crime scene investigators really getting too much wrong as far as when they do, you know, like where the gunshots are coming from, things like that. And then as far as autopsies, when obviously the autopsy is showing that this was close range that they got shot at. So I don't know. I believe things like that over obviously the other evidence that they have. That's their strongest evidence, but they can't really place blame on one or the other without a weapon, without anything like that. So it could be Portland too, though. And he just happened to get lucky. Could be him too. Because like I said, he had the gunshot residue on his hands, but Melly didn't. But they did bring somebody in court that has said that is really an expert on ballistics and the gunshot residue and things like that. But apparently if you wash your hands or rub up against different materials, that it can come off pretty easily. So they didn't arrest them until months later. But I don't know. I feel like he did it. He just happened to get lucky and might get off. So I'm definitely going to follow up with this one. But it's going to be a minute because January 2027, we just started 26. That's crazy. But like I said, yeah, it was on his hand. So like I said, he could have been the one to do it. Melly could have been the one to do it. Because Bortland did say in his testimony, in his court case, because I did have to go to his too to kind of see what was going on with him, since they in the same story. He tried to say that he was in the back seat. But yet you're the one pulling up to the hospital. You're the driver. You show coming out the studio, getting into the driver's seat. It's your vehicle. But then all of a sudden you got in the back seat somehow. Melly wasn't in the vehicle. Who was driving? If these two over here and they got shot. So they had a lot of different lies and they tried to pull a lot of different things from Bortland's case over to Melly's case, of the different stories and lies that were told. So I know some people like on social media were saying that Melly should get on the stand to testify and give his account. But honestly, that probably wouldn't be smart. You know, it's not always smart in these type of cases for you to get up on the stand, for you to be cross-examined. Like, why I got to tell my story? You're supposed to prove it to me that I did this. So I'm not going to get up here and give you anything. So I don't think he'll get on stand, though. Honestly, feel like this will probably be another mistrial. Prosecution better hope at this point that 8 out of 12 jurors side with them. You cannot go off emotions. You have to go on the facts at hand. You cannot go off of thoughts. None of that. Like I said, me personally, my thoughts is that he did it. But based on the facts, you can't prove it. There's no proof. I can say that he was there. Him and Bortland, they were there. But other than that, you know, there's not really much else aside from that bullet analysis that they have. So that's my thoughts on it. And like I said, share y'all thoughts. I'd love to hear what y'all think, because this was a good case to go over. So thank you for the suggestion. If you do have any other cases for me to possibly look up, let me know, because this was definitely a good one to go through. I do like these crazy cases to look into and laws to look up and to educate y'all at the end of the day and to learn some things myself. So again, thank you for tuning in. Till next time.
Dissected the unknown dethroned. Whispers in the courtroom, loud as thunder. Behind the scenes, peel back the blunder.